What happens if you sue multiple people or businesses, but some of them settle with you before the trial? And for purposes of this conversation, settlement just means you and the person you're suing reach an agreement. They pay you money, you release them from the claim, they're dismissed. So for today, we're going to talk briefly about a simple auto accident. Jim's driving down the street, a pedestrian steps into the roadway. Jim stops so he doesn't kill the pedestrian. Jim did the right thing. Well, behind Jim was Ann. Ann does not see the pedestrian. Ann does not stop in time, and Ann rear ends Jim. And that hurts Jim. Well, while Jim's car is stuck and Ann's car is stuck, Eddie comes along and rear ends Ann, and not only does he smash Ann's car, but he pushes Ann's car into Jim's car, and Jim is smacked a second time. So Jim is injured, he sues Ann, he sues Eddie for his personal injuries, and the case is marching along towards trial. Well, at some point, Ann and Jim make an agreement. Ann is going to pay Jim a certain amount of money, probably her insurance company, and Jim, in exchange, is going to release Ann from the lawsuit. She's dismissed. She's no longer party to the claim. She goes on with her life. Well, Jim still has his lawsuit against Eddie. So Jim's going to trial against Eddie. So what happens? Well, Eddie wants to blame Ann for most of the injuries to Jim, but Ann is dismissed. So what happens? Well, at least here in the state of Nevada, the law, well, I'll give you the law for any nerds that want to look this up. NRS 41.141 talks about something called comparative fault, and that's where there is fault for more than one person. And it actually says, and I'm quoting here, if a defendant in such an action, personal injury action, settles with one plaintiff before the entry of a judgment, the comparative negligence of that defendant and the amount of the settlement must not be admitted into evidence or considered by the jury. So what does that mean for the party who is left? Well, when a case goes to trial, there is generally a verdict form, and the jurors are going to come to a decision. They're going to write on the verdict form, what their findings are. So Eddie would love to have Ann's name on that verdict form, because Eddie is going to say, look, maybe I'm a little bit at fault, but most of the accident was caused by Ann. Most of the injuries were caused by Ann. Therefore, Ann should be allocated most of the fault. Well, guess what? At least here in Nevada, Eddie can't do that. Ann is not going to be on the verdict form. The jury is not going to hear about Ann's portion of fault. So Eddie is a little bit stuck. So Jim's going to say, I'm hurt. There was an accident. Here's how this accident happened. And I'm suing Eddie. What's Eddie going to be able to do? Well, Eddie can't say, well, I'm 20% and Ann is 80%, because Ann's not going to be on the verdict form. So Jim is sort of in a bit of a pickle, where he's going to say what? He's going to say, first of all, Jim wasn't injured. And if he can prove Jim wasn't injured, then there's going to be no verdict against Eddie. So that's a win for Eddie. Alternatively, Eddie is going to say, Jim was injured, but all of his injuries were caused by this other driver and not by me. So that's sort of a tenuous position to be in, because if you're a juror and you believe that Jim was injured, there's only one other person in the courtroom, and that's Eddie. And so there's a high likelihood a jury is going to hit Eddie with the full verdict. So if you are bringing a claim for personal injuries and there's multiple parties, if you do settle with one of the parties, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the remaining party to try to settle the case with you as well. So hope this helps. Thanks very much for watching.